The evening sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park as Marcus Chen sat alone on the weathered wooden bench, his pale hands folded in his lap. At 28 years old, he had the kind of sharp, aristocratic features that made people do double takes on the street. His jet black hair was always perfectly styled, and he wore expensive dark suits even on casual outings like this one. What people didn't know was that Marcus had been 28 for the past 200 years. Marcus had come to this particular park every evening for the past month, drawn by something he couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the way the ancient oak trees reminded him of his homeland in Romania, or maybe it was simply the peace he found watching families enjoy their time together. As someone who had lived centuries in solitude, these glimpses of human connection both fascinated and pained him. Tonight was different, though. As Marcus sat lost in thought, he noticed a small figure approaching his bench. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, with bouncing brown curls and bright green eyes, was walking directly toward him. She wore a simple yellow dress with tiny flower patterns and clutched a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Excuse me, mister," the girl said, her voice clear and confident despite her small stature. "Are you sad?" Marcus blinked in surprise. In all his years, children had always seemed to sense something different about him and kept their distance. This was the first time a child had voluntarily approached him, let alone spoken to him. "I suppose I might look sad," Marcus replied carefully, his accent carrying hints of old European nobility. "Why do you ask, little one?" The girl climbed onto the bench beside him without invitation, setting her stuffed rabbit between them. "My mom says when people sit alone and look far away like you do, it usually means they're lonely or sad about something. I'm Emma, by the way. Emma Rodriguez." "It's very nice to meet you, Emma," Marcus said, genuinely touched by her directness. "My name is Marcus." Emma studied his face with the intense curiosity that only children possess. "You have really pale skin," she observed matter-of-factly. "And your eyes are super dark, like my mom's coffee in the morning. Are you sick?" Marcus couldn't help but smile at her innocent observation. "No, I'm not sick. I just don't get much sun." "Oh, like my friend Jake. He has that thing where the sun hurts his skin, so he has to stay inside a lot." "That's probably why you're sad then. My mom says sunshine makes everyone feel better." Before Marcus could respond, a woman's voice called out from across the park. "Emma! Emma, where are you?" "That's my mom," Emma said, waving enthusiastically toward a woman hurrying in their direction. "Mom! I'm over here!" The woman approaching them was clearly Emma's mother. She had the same warm green eyes and similar brown hair, though hers was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore scrubs with colorful cartoon characters on them, suggesting she worked in healthcare, probably with children. Her face showed a mixture of relief at finding Emma and concern about her talking to a stranger. "Emma, what have I told you about wandering off?" the woman said as she reached the bench, though her tone was more worried than angry. She looked at Marcus with polite but cautious curiosity. "I'm sorry if my daughter was bothering you." "Not at all," Marcus stood immediately, his old-world manners automatic. "She's a delightful young lady. I'm Marcus Chen." "Sarah Rodriguez," the woman replied, extending her hand for a handshake. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, knowing his skin would feel unnaturally cold, but he couldn't be rude. As expected, Sarah's eyes flickered with surprise at the temperature of his hand, but she didn't comment. "Mom, Marcus is sad because he doesn't get enough sunshine," Emma announced with the confidence of someone who had solved a great mystery. "Maybe he could come have dinner with us. You always say food and company make everything better." "Emma!" Sarah's cheeks flushed pink with embarrassment. "You can't just invite strangers to dinner." Marcus found himself charmed by both the little girl's boldness and her mother's obvious mortification. "Please don't worry about it." Emma was just being kind, but Emma wasn't finished with her idea. She stood up on the bench so she was closer to Marcus's height and looked at him with serious 7-year-old intensity. "Do you have family, Marcus?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Images flashed through his mind of faces he had loved and lost over the centuries, of the family he had been forced to leave behind when he was turned, of the isolation that had become his constant companion. "No," he said quietly, "I don't have family." Emma's face scrunched up with sympathy that seemed far too mature for her years. "That's really sad. Everyone should have family." She turned to her mother with determination. "Mom, Marcus doesn't have anyone. Can't he be part of our family? Just for a little while?" Sarah looked between her daughter and this strange, pale man who dressed like he had stepped out of a vintage movie. There was something about Marcus that intrigued her despite her natural caution as a single mother. His loneliness seemed genuine and deep, and the careful way he spoke to Emma showed respect and kindness. "I appreciate Emma's thoughtfulness," Marcus said quickly, sensing Sarah's hesitation. "But I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing," Sarah found herself saying, surprising herself with the words, "Emma's right that everyone should have somewhere to belong, even if it's just for an evening. Would you like to join us for dinner? I was planning to cook spaghetti and I always make too much anyway." Marcus stared at her in genuine shock. When was the last time someone had shown him such simple, uncomplicated kindness? When was the last time he had been invited into someone's home, asked to share a meal, treated like a normal person instead of the monster he knew himself to be? "Are you certain?" he asked. "I'm a bit unusual company," Emma giggled. "Everybody's unusual, Marcus. That's what makes people interesting." Sarah smiled at her daughter's wisdom. "She's right. Unusual can be good. So what do you say?" Marcus looked at these two kind souls who had somehow seen past whatever dark aura usually surrounded him and offered him something he hadn't experienced in decades: inclusion. The rational part of his mind warned him that getting close to humans was dangerous, for them and for him. But the lonely part of his heart, the part that had been growing stronger during these evening visits to the park, yearned desperately for connection. "I would be honored to join you for dinner," he said formally, and Emma clapped her hands with joy. As they walked through the park together toward Sarah's car, Marcus listened to Emma chatter about her day at school, her teacher, Mrs. Colland, Peterson, and how she had learned to tie her shoes all by herself that morning. Sarah walked beside them, occasionally adding gentle corrections to Emma's more dramatic storytelling, and Marcus found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. "Do you live around here?" Sarah asked as they reached her modest sedan. "Not far," Marcus replied vaguely. In truth, he owned a large old house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a gothic novel. He had bought it decades ago when he first settled in this area, drawn by its isolation and the fact that none of the neighbors were close enough to notice his unusual habits. Emma insisted that Marcus sit in the front seat while she buckled herself into her booster seat in the back. During the short drive to their home, she kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking Marcus about his favorite colors, whether he liked animals, and if he knew how to make pancakes. "I like purple and silver," Marcus answered truthfully. "I do like animals, though I don't have any pets, and I'm afraid I haven't made pancakes in quite some time." "That's okay," Emma said generously. "Mom makes the best pancakes in the whole world. Maybe she can teach you." Sarah glanced at Marcus as she pulled into the driveway of a small, cheerful house with a bright blue front door. "Fair warning, our house is nothing fancy. It's just me and Emma, and we're still getting settled." The house was indeed modest, but as they walked up to the front door, Marcus could see the care that had gone into making it a home. There were flower boxes under the windows filled with colorful blooms, a small garden to one side where tomatoes and herbs were growing, and children's chalk drawings decorating the sidewalk. "It's beautiful," Marcus said sincerely. "It feels like a real home." Sarah looked pleased by the compliment as she unlocked the front door. "Come on in. Emma, go wash your hands. Marcus, would you like something to drink?" The interior of the house was as warm and welcoming as the outside suggested. The living room had comfortable, if slightly worn, furniture arranged around a small television. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with a mixture of medical textbooks, novels, and children's books. Family photos were scattered throughout the room, showing Emma at various ages and Sarah with people who were clearly her parents and siblings. Water would be fine, Marcus said, though he had no need for human refreshment. He found himself drawn to the family photos, studying the faces of people who clearly loved each other. "That's my family back in California," Sarah explained, following his gaze. "My parents, my sister Maria, and her husband David, and their kids. We moved here about 6 months ago when I got a job at the children's hospital. It must be difficult being so far from them," Marcus observed. "It is," Sarah admitted. "But the job opportunity was too good to pass up, and I wanted Emma to have better opportunities than we had back home. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, though. It gets lonely." The word lonely hung in the air between them, and Marcus felt a recognition pass between them. Here was someone else who understood isolation, albeit for very different reasons than his own. Emma came running back into the room, her hands freshly washed and her hair slightly damp where she had apparently splashed water on herself. "Can Marcus see my room while you cook?" she asked her mother. "If Marcus wants to," Sarah said, looking at him questioningly. "I would love to see your room," Marcus said to Emma. And he meant it. When was the last time a child had wanted to share their space with him? Emma grabbed his cold hand without hesitation and led him down a short hallway to a small bedroom that was clearly her pride and joy. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, and every surface was covered with the treasures of childhood: stuffed animals, picture books, art supplies, and drawings that had been carefully taped to the walls. "This is Mr. Deep Buttons," Emma said, introducing Marcus to the stuffed rabbit she had been carrying earlier. "He's been my best friend since I was really little. And this is where I do my homework," she continued, showing him a small desk by the window. "And these are all the pictures I drew." Marcus examined the artwork seriously, giving each drawing the attention it deserved. There were pictures of houses with crooked chimneys, stick-figure families holding hands, and several drawings that appeared to be of Emma and her mother doing various activities together. "These are remarkable," Marcus said honestly. "You're quite an artist." Emma beamed at the praise. "Mom says I get it from my grandpa. He was an artist too, but he died before I was born." Her expression grew serious for a moment. "Do you think people who die can still see us sometimes?" The question caught Marcus off guard. In his long existence, he had seen enough of death to know that it was indeed final for humans, but he couldn't bring himself to crush a child's hope. "I think," he said carefully, "that love doesn't die even when people do. So, in a way, the people who loved us are always still with us." Emma nodded solemnly, apparently satisfied with this answer. "That's what Mom says too. She says even though Daddy isn't here anymore, he still loves us from wherever he is." Marcus felt another shock of recognition. So Sarah was widowed, not divorced. That explained the sadness he had sensed beneath her kindness, the way she had understood loneliness so quickly. "Your father was very lucky to have such a wonderful daughter," Marcus said gently. "Mom says I'm just like him," Emma replied, then brightened again with the resilience of childhood. "Come on, let's go see if Mom needs help with dinner." They returned to the kitchen to find Sarah stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce that smelled absolutely delicious. Marcus's enhanced senses could pick up every ingredient: garlic, oregano, basil, and something else that might have been her secret ingredient. "Perfect timing," Sarah said. "Emma, can you set the table for 3? Marcus, are you sure you're okay with just water?" "Absolutely," Marcus assured her, though he was beginning to worry about the actual eating portion of the evening. It had been so long since he had attempted human food that he wasn't sure his system could handle it anymore. As Emma carefully placed plates and silverware on the small dining table, Marcus found himself watching the easy domesticity of the scene with a mixture of longing and amazement. This was what family looked like, what home felt like. For centuries he had observed human families from the outside, but he had never been invited to participate. "So what do you do for work?" Sarah asked as she drained the pasta. Marcus hesitated. His actual work involved managing the various investments and properties he had acquired over 2 centuries, but that wasn't exactly a normal job description.
"I work in
property management," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Mostly old buildings and estates. "What about you?" "I'm a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Children's Hospital," Sarah replied. "I specialize in oncology." Marcus felt a deep respect for this woman who spent her days caring for sick children. "That must be both rewarding and heartbreaking work." "It is," Sarah agreed, "but the kids are amazing. They have this incredible strength and hope even when things look impossible. They remind me every day that there's good in the world worth fighting for." As they sat down to dinner, Marcus carefully took small bites of the spaghetti, hoping his supernatural constitution would allow him to at least appear to eat normally. To his surprise, the food didn't make him sick, though he couldn't really taste it the way he once had. Emma, meanwhile, was regaling them with stories from school, including a detailed account of how her friend Jessica had brought her pet hamster for show and tell, and it had escaped its cage, causing chaos in the classroom. "Mrs. Peterson was climbing on chairs," Emma giggled, "and Tommy was crawling under desks trying to catch Mr. Whiskers. It was the best day ever." "I bet your teacher didn't think it was the best day ever," Sarah said with amusement. "She was laughing too once we caught him," Emma insisted. "She said it made the day more exciting." Marcus found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember. Emma's joy was infectious, and Sarah's gentle parenting style reminded him of his own mother from so very long ago. "Do you have any funny stories from when you were little?" Emma asked Marcus. Again, Marcus had to navigate the truth carefully. His childhood had been in a very different time and place, and most of his memories from that era were too distant or too dark to share with the child. "I remember once when I was about your age," he said slowly. "I tried to climb a very tall tree to get a better look at some birds. I got stuck halfway up and couldn't get down. My mother had to call for help from the neighbors." "Did you get in trouble?" Emma asked, with the fascination of one child for another's mischief. "Oh yes," Marcus replied. "But my mother was so relieved that I was safe that she didn't stay angry for long." After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Marcus her collection of books, which ranged from simple picture books to more advanced chapter books that she was learning to read on her own. Marcus listened patiently as she read him a story about a brave little mouse who went on an adventure, and he found himself genuinely invested in the mouse's journey. "You're a very good reader," he told her when she finished. "Mom reads to me every night," Emma explained. "She does all different voices for the characters." "I'd love to hear that sometime," Marcus said without thinking. The words hung in the air, and Marcus realized he had implied he would be here again, which presumed an invitation that might not come. But Sarah smiled. "You're welcome to join us for story time any time," she said. "Emma loves having an audience for her reading." As the evening wound down, Marcus reluctantly realized he should leave. He had been in this warm, welcoming home for several hours, and while every minute had been precious to him, he didn't want to overstay his welcome. "I should probably head home," he said as Emma began to show signs of getting sleepy. "Already?" Emma protested. "But we didn't show you all my books yet." "Perhaps another time," Marcus said gently. "Your mother is right that it's getting late for little girls." Emma considered this, then came to him and wrapped her small arms around his waist in an unexpected hug. "Thank you for having dinner with us, Marcus. Will you come back and visit again?" Marcus looked over Emma's head at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "I would like that very much," he said, and meant it more than he had meant anything in decades. As Sarah walked him to the door, she paused with her hand on the doorknob. "Thank you," she said quietly. I know Emma invited you rather boldly, but it was nice having company. It was nice having someone to talk to who isn't 7-year-old. No offense to 7-year-olds. Thank you for welcoming me into your home, Marcus replied. I can't remember the last time I felt so included. You're welcome here anytime, Sarah said, and Marcus could tell she meant it. Emma was right about one thing. Everyone should have somewhere to belong. As Marcus walked back toward the park where he had left his own car, he found himself marveling at the evening's events. For the first time in 2 centuries, he had shared a meal with a family, been welcomed into a home, been treated not as a monster or an outsider, but simply as a friend. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long felt different now, less like a permanent condition and more like something that might, possibly, have a cure. Behind him, in the little house with the blue door, Sarah was tucking Emma into bed. I like Marcus, Emma announced as her mother pulled the covers up to her chin. He listens really good, and he has sad eyes like yours sometimes. What do you mean, sweetheart? Sarah asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Sometimes you get this look like you're far away and sad, Emma explained with the perceptiveness that sometimes surprised Sarah. Marcus has that look too. I think maybe he's lonely, like we are sometimes. Sarah considered her daughter's words. There had been something about Marcus that intrigued her, beyond his unusual appearance and formal manners. There had been a depth of sadness in his eyes that suggested someone who had experienced real loss, and a gratitude for simple kindness that touched her heart. Maybe we can be his friends, Emma continued sleepily. Everyone needs friends. Maybe we can, Sarah agreed, kissing her daughter's forehead. Sweet dreams, baby girl. As Sarah turned off the light and left Emma's room, she found herself thinking about their dinner guest. There had been something almost otherworldly about Marcus, from his pale skin and formal speech to the way he had seemed genuinely amazed by their simple family dinner. But there had also been a gentleness in the way he interacted with Emma and a loneliness that resonated with her own experience of being far from family and raising a child alone. Perhaps Emma was right. Perhaps they could all use more friends. Miles away in his large, empty house, Marcus sat in his study surrounded by books and memories from centuries past. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't dwelling on the past. Instead, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow evening, when he might return to the park and perhaps encounter a certain little girl and her kind mother again. The isolation that had defined his existence for so long suddenly felt less absolute. Maybe, just maybe, he had found something he had thought lost forever, the possibility of belonging somewhere again. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus found himself drawn to Riverside Park every evening, like a moth to flame. What had started as solitary contemplation had transformed into something he looked forward to, with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified him. Emma and Sarah had become a regular part of his evenings, and their easy acceptance of his presence in their lives felt like a miracle he didn't deserve but couldn't resist. Emma had appointed herself as his guide to modern childhood, explaining everything from playground politics to the complex social dynamics of first grade. She had an endless supply of stories, questions, and observations that kept Marcus constantly entertained. More importantly, she had begun to treat him not as a mysterious stranger, but as a beloved family friend. Marcus! Emma called out as she spotted him on their usual bench on a particularly warm Tuesday evening. Guess what happened at school today? Marcus had learned that this greeting meant he was about to hear something that Emma considered monumentally important, which could range from discovering a new type of butterfly to learning that chocolate milk was being served in the cafeteria. With trust, Teddy. I can't imagine, Marcus said with genuine interest as Emma climbed onto the bench beside him. Tell me everything. Miss Peterson said I could be the line leader tomorrow because I helped Timothy when he fell down at recess, Emma announced proudly. And I get to feed the class fish this week. Those are significant honors, Marcus said seriously, having learned that Emma's achievements, no matter how small, deserved proper recognition. You must have been very kind to Timothy. He scraped his knee and was crying, Emma explained. I helped him get to the nurse and told him jokes so he wouldn't be so scared. Mom says helping people when they're hurt is one of the most important things we can do. Marcus felt that familiar tug in his chest that Emma's wisdom often caused. This child, who was barely 7 years old, understood compassion and kindness in ways that many adults never achieved. Your mother is very wise, Marcus said. And so are you. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, looking tired, but pleased to see them. Marcus had learned to read the subtle signs of her stress levels by now. Today, her hair was a bit more disheveled than usual, and she had that particular exhaustion that came from a difficult day at the hospital. Rough day? Marcus asked gently as she sat down on his other side. Sarah sighed, unconsciously leaning slightly against his shoulder. Over the past 2 weeks, the physical distance between them had gradually decreased as comfort and familiarity grew. We lost a patient today, she said quietly, mindful of Emma, who was distracted by a squirrel nearby. A little boy, 8 years old. We fought so hard, and for a while we thought. She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. In his centuries of existence, he had witnessed more death than any being should, but he had never had to fight for life the way Sarah did every day. Her strength amazed him. I'm sorry, he said, wishing he had better words to offer comfort. It's part of the job, Sarah replied, though Marcus could hear the pain underneath her practical tone. But some days are harder than others. Some kids just get under your skin, you know? Marcus did know, though not in the way Sarah meant. Emma had gotten under his skin in a way that terrified him. This little family had become precious to him, in a way that made him vulnerable in ways he hadn't experienced since his human days. Mom, Emma said, appearing suddenly at Sarah's knee. Are you sad about work again? Sarah smiled and pulled Emma closer. A little bit, sweetheart, but I'm feeling better now that I'm here with you and Marcus. Emma considered this seriously, then turned to Marcus with the expression she got when she was working out a problem. Marcus, do you know how to make people feel better when they're sad? She asked. I'm not sure, Marcus answered honestly. What do you think works best? Emma thought for a moment, then brightened. Hugs work really good. And ice cream. And sometimes when Mom is really sad, I sing to her. Those sound like excellent remedies, Marcus agreed. Do you want me to sing to you, Mom? Emma offered. I learned a new song at school. I would love that, Sarah said, and Marcus could see some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Emma stood up on the bench and launched into a slightly off-key but enthusiastic rendition of You Are My Sunshine. Her small voice carried across the park, and Marcus watched other families nearby smile at the sound. When she finished, she took a dramatic bow. That was beautiful, Marcus said, applauding. I think that would make anyone feel better. Your turn, Emma announced, pointing at Marcus. Sing something. Marcus felt a moment of panic. He hadn't sung in public for decades, and certainly nothing appropriate for a 7-year-old audience. I don't think, he began, but Emma cut him off. Please, Mom sings to me all the time. I want to hear what your voice sounds like when you sing. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was watching with amusement and curiosity. There was something in her expression that suggested she was as interested in his answer as Emma was. I suppose I could try, Marcus said carefully. He thought for a moment, then began to sing softly in a language that Emma wouldn't recognize. It was a lullaby from his homeland, one his own mother had sung to him centuries ago. His voice, trained in a time when gentlemen learned music as a matter of course, was rich and melodic, even kept low. Emma listened with wide eyes, and even Sarah seemed transfixed. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, Emma whispered. What language was that? Romanian, Marcus answered truthfully. It's a lullaby my mother used to sing to me when I was very small. It sounded like magic, Emma said with 7-year-old conviction. Can you teach it to me? Perhaps someday, Marcus said, though he wondered if he would remember enough of his human childhood to teach her the words properly. Are you from Romania originally? Sarah asked with interest. That would explain your accent. Marcus nodded, sticking as close to the truth as possible. I came to America a long time ago. Do you miss it? Emma asked. Romania, I mean. The question hit Marcus unexpectedly hard. Did he miss Romania? He missed the Romania of his human days, the green hills and ancient forests, the small village where everyone knew everyone else. But that Romania existed only in his memories now. The modern country would be as foreign to him as any other place. I miss what it used to be, he said finally. But home isn't always a place, is it? Sometimes home is the people you care about. Sarah looked at him with an expression that suggested she understood exactly what he meant. As the evening grew cooler, they decided to walk to the small cafe near the park for ice cream. Emma had declared that ice cream would complete the healing process for her mother's sad day, and Marcus found himself unable to argue with her logic. The cafe was busy with other families enjoying the mild evening, and Marcus felt a strange sense of normalcy as they found a small table by the window. Emma ordered a large sundae with extra sprinkles. Sarah chose a simple vanilla cone, and Marcus ordered coffee, hoping he could manage to drink it without obvious difficulty. Marcus, Emma said around a spoonful of ice cream, do you ever get lonely? The directness of the question caught both Marcus and Sarah off guard. Emma, Sarah said gently, that's a very personal question. It's all right, Marcus said. He looked at Emma, who was waiting for his answer with the patient expectation of someone who genuinely cared about the response. Yes, he said simply. I do get lonely sometimes, but not when you're with us, right? Emma asked hopefully. Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. No, not when I'm with you, Emma nodded with satisfaction, as if she had solved another important problem. Good. Because we don't get lonely when you're with us either. Sarah reached across the table and briefly touched Marcus's hand. She's right. These past couple of weeks have been really nice. It's good to have a friend. The word friend settled around Marcus like a warm blanket. When was the last time someone had called him friend? When was the last time he had been able to think of himself that way? For me as well, he said quietly. As they walked back to the park where Sarah's car was parked, Emma skipped ahead of them, chasing fireflies that were beginning to emerge in the growing dusk. Can I ask you something? Sarah said to Marcus as they walked slowly behind Emma. Of course, that night when Emma first invited you to dinner, you looked so surprised when she talked to you, like you weren't used to people approaching you. Is everything okay? I mean, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but you seem like someone who's been alone for a long time. Marcus considered how to answer. Sarah's perceptiveness was both a gift and a danger. She saw too much, understood too much. I've been on my own for many years, he said carefully. I'm not used to this. Family dinners, conversations in the park, people who care whether I'm lonely or not. It's been a long time since I've had friends. What happened to them? Sarah asked gently. Your friends, I mean? Time, Marcus said, which was true in more ways than Sarah could imagine. People move away, circumstances change, life happens. Sarah nodded, understanding. I know what that's like. When David died, I lost most of our couple friends too. It's like when you're suddenly single again, especially as a parent, you don't fit into the same social circles anymore. David. This was the first time Sarah had mentioned her husband's name, and Marcus felt honored that she trusted him enough to share it. How long ago? Marcus asked softly. 2 years, Sarah said. Emma was 5 when it happened. Car accident, very sudden. One day we were a complete family, and the next day it was just me and Emma figuring out how to keep going. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and meant it, Teddy. He had experienced loss in his own way, but the sudden destruction of a happy family was a particular kind of tragedy that he had only observed from the outside. Thank you. Sarah replied. It's getting easier, slowly. Emma helps. She has this amazing ability to find joy in everyday things, which reminds me to do the same. And lately, she paused, glancing at Marcus. Having you around has helped too. It's nice to have adult conversation. Someone who listens. Someone who cares about what happens to us. Marcus felt that dangerous warmth spreading through his chest again. These people cared about him, worried about his loneliness, wanted his company. After centuries of isolation, it felt like a dream he was afraid to trust. "Mom, Marcus!" Emma called from near the playground. "Come push me on the swings." They spent the next half hour taking turns pushing Emma on the swing set, listening to her delighted laughter as she soared higher and higher. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the simple pleasure of making a child happy, something he had never experienced in his long existence. As they finally prepared to leave the park, Emma turned to Marcus with a serious expression. "Marcus, are you going to be here tomorrow?" "If you'd like me to be," Marcus replied. "I would like that very much," Emma said formally, mimicking his careful way of speaking. Then she grinned. "And Mom would too." Sarah laughed and ruffled Emma's hair. "Emma, you can't speak for other people." "But it's true, isn't it?" Emma asked with innocent directness. Sarah looked at Marcus, and he saw something in her expression that made his heart race in ways it hadn't for decades. "Yes," she said softly. "It's true." The next evening, Marcus arrived at the park to find Sarah sitting on their usual bench alone, looking more stressed than he had ever seen her. "Where's Emma?" he asked immediately, sensing something was wrong. "She's at home with a fever," Sarah explained. "She was fine this morning, but her teacher called around noon saying she felt sick. I had to leave work early to pick her up." Marcus sat down beside her, noting the worry lines around her eyes. "Is she all right?" "Probably just a bug that's going around her school," Sarah said. But Marcus could hear the anxiety underneath her practical tone. "As a nurse, I know that kids get sick all the time, and it's usually nothing serious. As a mom, especially a single mom, every fever feels like a potential catastrophe." "Have you eaten today?" Marcus asked, noticing how pale and tired she looked. Sarah thought for a moment. "I had coffee for breakfast. I was supposed to have lunch, but then the call came from Emma's school." "You need to take care of yourself too," Marcus said gently. "You can't take care of Emma if you collapse from exhaustion." I know, Sarah said, rubbing her temples. "It's just hard sometimes doing everything alone. When David was alive, we could tag team when Emma was sick. One of us could stay home with her while the other went to work, or one could make dinner while the other did the worrying. Now it all falls on me, and some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to help, to ease this woman's burden in whatever way he could. The protective instinct that Emma had awakened in him extended fully to her mother as well. "What if I helped?" he offered impulsively. Sarah looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you didn't have to do everything alone? I could sit with Emma while you go get some dinner, or I could bring you both some food so you don't have to cook tonight." "Marcus, I can't ask you to do that," Sarah protested. "You're not responsible for us." "You're not asking," Marcus pointed out. "I'm offering. And maybe I'm not responsible for you, but I care about you. Both of you. Friends help each other, don't they?" Sarah stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her internal struggle between fierce independence and genuine need for support. "Are you sure?" she asked finally. "Emma's probably contagious, and she can be pretty cranky when she doesn't feel good." Marcus smiled. "I'm sure I can handle one cranky 7-year-old. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself standing in Sarah and Emma's living room, feeling like he was crossing a threshold he couldn't return from. Being invited for dinner was one thing, but being trusted to help care for a sick child felt like a level of intimacy and responsibility that both thrilled and terrified him. Emma was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a purple blanket, looking small and miserable. Her normally bright eyes were dull with fever, and her cheeks were flushed pink. "Marcus," she said, perking up slightly when she saw him. "Mom said you came to help take care of me." "That's right," Marcus said, sitting carefully on the edge of the couch. "How are you feeling?" "Yucky," Emma said honestly. "My head hurts and my stomach feels funny." Marcus looked at Sarah, who was hovering anxiously nearby. "Go," he said gently. "Get yourself some food, take a shower, do whatever you need to do. We'll be fine." Sarah hesitated for another moment, then leaned down to kiss Emma's forehead. "I'll be back in an hour, okay, baby? Marcus will take good care of you." After Sarah left, Marcus found himself alone with Emma for the first time since they had met. The responsibility felt enormous. This small, sick person was trusting him completely, and he was terrified of doing something wrong. "Will you read to me?" Emma asked in a small voice. "My head hurts too much to read by myself." "Of course," Marcus said, relief flooding through him. Reading he could handle. Emma pointed to a pile of books on the coffee table, and Marcus selected one about a brave little mouse who went on adventures. He had read this particular book several times during his previous visits, and he knew Emma loved the different voices he did for each character. As he read, Emma gradually relaxed against the couch cushions, her breathing becoming steadier. By the time he finished the story, her eyes were drooping. "Marcus?" she said sleepily. "Yes? Are you going to stay until Mom comes back?" "Absolutely," Marcus promised. "Good," Emma murmured. "I feel safer when you're here." The simple statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. This child felt safer because of his presence. Him, a creature who had spent centuries as a predator, who had been feared and avoided by every human who had ever sensed what he truly was. Emma not only accepted him but found comfort in his presence. Emma dozed fitfully for the next hour, occasionally waking up to ask for water or to have her blanket adjusted. Marcus found himself moving carefully around the house, fetching drinks and damp cloths for her forehead, feeling strangely domestic and protective. When Sarah returned carrying bags of Chinese takeout, she found Marcus sitting on the floor next to the couch, gently stroking Emma's hair while she slept. "How was she?" Sarah whispered. "She had some water and dozed on and off," Marcus reported quietly. "Her fever seems a bit lower than when you left." Sarah felt Emma's forehead and nodded with relief. "You're right. Thank you so much for staying with her." "It was my pleasure," Marcus said, and realized he meant it completely. They ate dinner quietly while Emma continued to sleep, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Marcus found himself telling Sarah about some of the books he had read recently, carefully editing out the fact that some of them were centuries old. Sarah told him about her work at the hospital, about the children she cared for, and the families she supported through the most difficult times of their lives. "You're remarkable," Marcus said as Sarah described a particularly challenging case she was working on. "The strength it must take to do what you do every day, to give so much of yourself to other people's children." "I love what I do," Sarah said simply. "But some days it's hard to keep giving when you feel like your own reserves are running low." "What refills your reserves?" Marcus asked. Sarah smiled, looking over at sleeping Emma. "This, coming home to her, hearing about her day, watching her discover new things. She reminds me why it's all worth it." "She's an extraordinary child," Marcus agreed. "You've raised her beautifully." "We've had help," Sarah said softly. "David was an amazing father even in the short time he had with her. And lately," she paused, looking at Marcus, "she's had you. Do you know she talks about you constantly? Marcus this, Marcus that. You've become so important to her." "She's become important to me too," Marcus admitted. "Both of you have." There was something in the air between them, a tension that Marcus recognized but didn't dare name. Sarah was looking at him with an expression that suggested she was seeing him not just as Emma's friend, or even her friend, but as something more. "Marcus," she said carefully, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "A girlfriend?" Or the question hung in the air, loaded with implications that made Marcus's heart race. "No," he said quietly. There's no one. There hasn't been anyone for a very long time. Why not? Sarah asked gently. I mean, you're handsome, intelligent, kind with children. I would think Marcus struggled with how to answer. How could he explain that romantic relationships were impossible when you were a creature that fed on blood? How could he tell her that everyone he had ever loved in his human life had aged and died while he remained unchanged? It's complicated, he said finally. My life is unusual. I've always felt like I couldn't offer someone what they deserved. Sarah studied his face, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing more than he intended to reveal. What if someone got to decide for themselves what they deserved? She asked softly. Before Marcus could answer, Emma stirred on the couch, blinking sleepily at them. Mom, she said in a small voice, my tummy hurts. The moment was broken as Sarah immediately went to her daughter, feeling her forehead and asking gentle questions about how she was feeling. Marcus watched them together, mother and child, and felt that familiar mixture of longing and terror that had become his constant companion. He was falling in love with this family, with the idea of being needed and wanted, but he was also terrified of what that love might cost all of them. As the evening wound down and Emma's fever continued to drop, Marcus prepared to leave. Sarah walked him to the door while Emma dozed on the couch. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, not just for tonight, but for everything, for being such a good friend to Emma, for listening to me, for caring about us. Thank you for letting me be part of this, Marcus replied, for including me, for trusting me with Emma tonight. They stood at the door for a moment, neither quite ready to end the evening. Finally, Sarah reached out and briefly touched his cheek. You're a good man, Marcus Chen, she said softly. I hope you know that. Marcus leaned slightly into her touch, closing his eyes for just a moment. I hope I can be, he whispered. As Marcus walked home through the dark streets, he reflected on the evening's events. He had crossed another line tonight, moved deeper into this family's life, taken on responsibility for their well-being. Every instinct told him it was dangerous, for them and for him. But every beat of his long, silent heart told him it was the most right thing he had done in centuries. Behind him, in the house with the blue door, Sarah was tucking a much-improved Emma back into her own bed. Is Marcus coming to the park tomorrow? Emma asked sleepily. I think so, sweetheart. Why? Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. Mom, do you think Marcus is lonely because he doesn't have a family? I think maybe he is, Sarah agreed. Then maybe we should ask him to be part of our family for real, Emma said with the matter-of-fact confidence of childhood. Not just for dinner sometimes, but really part of it. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, thinking about the way Marcus had cared for Emma tonight, the way his face lit up when he saw them, the way her own heart had started racing when he was near. Maybe we should, she whispered, but Emma was already asleep. Outside, the moon was full and bright, and Marcus stood in his empty house wondering if he dared to hope that somewhere in this vast, lonely world he might finally have found a place to call home. 3 months had passed since that first evening in the park, and Marcus's life had been completely transformed. What had begun as chance encounters had evolved into something that resembled the family life he had thought lost to him forever. He had dinner at Sarah and Emma's house at least 3 times a week, helped Emma with homework, attended her school plays and soccer games, and had somehow become an integral part of their daily routine. On this particular Saturday morning, Marcus found himself in Sarah's kitchen making pancakes while she worked an emergency shift at the hospital. Emma sat at the counter in her pajamas, chattering about her plans for the day and watching Marcus flip pancakes with the serious concentration of someone still learning to master the technique. You're getting really good at this, Emma observed as Marcus successfully flipped a pancake without it falling apart. Remember the first time you tried to make breakfast? You burned the toast and the eggs were all runny? Marcus laughed, remembering that disastrous morning 3 weeks ago when Sarah had been called in early and he had volunteered to handle Emma's breakfast. His centuries of existence had not prepared him for the complexities of modern kitchen appliances. "Practice makes perfect," he said, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto Emma's plate. "Mom says you're a quick learner," Emma said, dousing her pancakes in syrup. "She says lots of people don't know how to take care of kids, but you figured it out really fast." The praise warmed Marcus in ways he hadn't expected. Over the past months, he had indeed learned to navigate the routines of caring for a 7-year-old. He could braid Emma's hair for school, knew which vegetables she would eat and which ones required negotiation, and had memorized the bedtime routine that would get her to sleep without a fight. "Your mom is a very good teacher," Marcus said, which was true. Sarah had patiently shown him everything from operating the washing machine to understanding Emma's subtle signals when she was getting tired or frustrated. "Marcus," Emma said, her voice taking on the serious tone that usually preceded one of her important questions, "can I ask you something?" "Always," Marcus replied, settling into the chair beside her with his own plate of pancakes. "Are you ever going to marry my mom?" Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. In all the questions Emma had asked him over the months, this was not one he had been prepared for. "Emma," he said carefully, that's a very complicated question." "Not really," Emma said with 7-year-old logic. "You love her, right? And she loves you. I can tell because you both get that sappy look when you think the other person isn't watching." Marcus stared at this small person who seemed to see everything with startling clarity. The truth was, he had fallen completely in love with Sarah Rodriguez. With Trust Teddy, somewhere between shared dinners and bedtime stories, between watching her care for sick children and seeing her laugh at Emma's jokes, he had lost his heart entirely. But loving someone and being able to marry them were very different things when you were a vampire. "Sometimes," Marcus said slowly, "caring about someone means wanting what's best for them, even if it's not what you want for yourself." Emma frowned, clearly not satisfied with this answer. "But what if what's best for them is being with you?" Before Marcus could figure out how to respond to that particular piece of wisdom, they heard Sarah's key in the front door. "How are my two favorite people?" Sarah called as she came into the kitchen, still wearing her scrubs and looking tired but happy. "Marcus made perfect pancakes," Emma announced. "And we were just talking about—" "Emma!" Marcus interrupted quickly. "Why don't you go get dressed while I make your mom some breakfast?" Emma shot him a look that clearly said, "This conversation isn't over," but she slid off her chair and headed toward her bedroom. "Thank you so much for staying with her," Sarah said, accepting the cup of coffee Marcus handed her. "I know it's not exactly how you planned to spend your Saturday morning." "I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be," Marcus said honestly. Sarah smiled, and Marcus felt that familiar flutter in his chest that her smile always caused. Over the months, the attraction between them had grown stronger and harder to ignore. There were moments when he caught her looking at him with an expression that suggested she was thinking about kissing him, and moments when the urge to pull her into his arms was almost overwhelming. "How was the hospital?" Marcus asked, trying to distract himself from thoughts of how beautiful Sarah looked, even when she was exhausted. "Busy night," Sarah said with a sigh. 3 kids came in with that flu that's been going around, and we had a little boy who needed emergency surgery. But everyone's going to be fine, which is what matters." Marcus watched as she unconsciously rubbed her neck, a habit he had noticed she had when she was particularly stressed. Without thinking, he moved behind her chair and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. "You're tense," he observed, beginning to massage the knots he could feel in her muscles. Sarah immediately relaxed under his touch, leaning back slightly in her chair. "That feels amazing," she murmured. "You have magic hands." If only she knew how literally true that might be, Marcus thought. His supernatural strength meant he could find and release tension with precision that no human could match. "Better?" he asked after a few minutes. "Much better," Sarah said, turning to face him. "Thank you." They were standing very close now, and Marcus could see flecks of gold in Sarah's green eyes. Her lips were slightly parted and he could hear her heart beating faster. For a moment, the air between them was charged with possibility. Then Emma came running back into the kitchen, fully dressed and ready for the day, and the moment was broken. "Are we still going to the zoo today?" Emma asked excitedly. "You promised we could see the new baby elephants." "Of course," Sarah said, though she looked slightly flustered. "Let me just change out of my scrubs and we can go." The zoo trip was a revelation for Marcus in ways he hadn't expected. He had visited zoos in various cities over the decades, but always alone, and usually at night when his appearance wouldn't attract attention. Experiencing it through Emma's eyes, seeing her delight at every animal and her endless stream of questions about their habitats and behaviors, made it feel like an entirely new experience. "Look, Marcus," Emma called from in front of the elephant enclosure. "The baby is playing with her mom." Marcus watched the baby elephant stumble around on unsteady legs while her mother kept a protective watch, and he felt a strange recognition. Wasn't that what he had been doing these past months? Learning to navigate this new life while Sarah and Emma patiently guided him? "They mate for life, elephants," Sarah said, coming to stand beside him. "The family units are incredibly strong. They mourn their dead and celebrate births together." "That sounds like a good way to live," Marcus said quietly. Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "It does, doesn't it?" As the day progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing into the role he had somehow acquired, part of a family unit, someone who belonged. Emma held his hand as they walked between exhibits. Sarah consulted him about which animals to visit next, and other visitors seemed to see them as exactly what they appeared to be, a mother, father, and daughter, enjoying a day together. Marcus found himself imagining what it would be like if this were real, if he could truly be Emma's stepfather and Sarah's husband. But reality always intruded. He was a creature who would never age while they grew older and eventually died. He would outlive them both, and that knowledge cast a shadow over even the happiest moments. "You're thinking too hard again," Emma announced as they sat eating ice cream near the penguin exhibit. "You get this wrinkly thing between your eyebrows when you worry." Marcus reached up self-consciously to touch his forehead. "Do I?" "Yeah, and Mom gets it too sometimes," Emma continued. "Usually when she's thinking about money or work or whether she's doing a good job taking care of me." Sarah laughed. "Emma, you don't need to analyze everyone's facial expressions." "But I'm good at it," Emma protested. "Like right now, you both have that look you get when you want to say something important but you're too scared." Marcus and Sarah looked at each other, both clearly startled by Emma's observation. "What do you think we want to say?" Sarah asked curiously. Emma considered this seriously. "I think," she said slowly, "that you both want to talk about whether Marcus is going to live with us for real, but you're both too scared to bring it up." The accuracy of Emma's assessment left both adults speechless. She was right, of course. The question of where their relationship was heading had been hanging in the air for weeks, unspoken but increasingly impossible to ignore. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "that's a very big topic." "Not really," Emma said pragmatically. "Marcus is here every day anyway. He helps me with homework. He makes dinner when you have to work late. He reads me bedtime stories. He comes to my school things. He's already like my dad, just without living in the same house." Marcus felt his heart stop at the word dad. In all his long existence, he had never imagined that someone might see him that way. "How would you feel," Sarah asked slowly, "if Marcus did move in with us?" Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Are you serious? That would be the best thing ever. Then I wouldn't have to say goodbye to him every night, and he could help you when you're sad, and we could be a real family." Marcus looked at Sarah, who was watching him with an expression of hope and terror that probably matched his own. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "there are some things about me that are complicated, things that might make it difficult for us to be a family the way you're imagining." Emma tilted her head, studying his face with that uncanny perception of hers. "Like what?" Are you sick? Are you married to someone else? Are you secretly a bank robber? Despite everything, Marcus had to laugh. No, I'm not a bank robber. Then what? Emma asked. What could be so complicated that it would stop you from being part of our family? Marcus struggled with how to answer. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that he was a creature who survived by drinking blood? How could he tell her that he was dangerous in ways she couldn't possibly understand? Sometimes, he said finally, people are different in ways that make normal life difficult. Everybody's different, Emma said with the wisdom that had become so familiar. Mrs. Peterson at school has diabetes and has to check her blood all the time. My friend Jake can't eat anything with nuts or he gets really sick. Tommy's dad is in a wheelchair because his legs don't work, but they all have families who love them anyway. Marcus felt tears he couldn't shed burning behind his eyes. This child's capacity for acceptance and love amazed him constantly. What if the difference was bigger than that? He asked quietly. What if it was something that made me dangerous? Emma considered this seriously. Are you dangerous to me and Mom? Marcus thought about this carefully. In all the months he had known them, he had never once felt the predatory hunger that had defined so much of his existence. Their presence seemed to quiet the monster in him, to remind him of the man he had once been. No, he said with certainty. Never to you and your mom. Then I don't care what kind of different you are. Emma said firmly, I want you to be my family. Sarah had been listening to this exchange with growing emotion. When Emma finished speaking, she reached across the picnic table and took Marcus's hand. She's right, Sarah said softly. Whatever it is, we can handle it together. That's what families do. Marcus looked at these two people who had somehow seen past whatever darkness surrounded him and chosen to love him anyway. The smart thing would be to walk away, to protect them from the truth of what he was. But for the first time in centuries, he wanted something more than he feared the consequences of having it. I love you both, he said quietly. More than I ever thought possible. We love you too, Sarah replied, and Emma nodded enthusiastically. That evening, after they had returned from the zoo and Emma was fast asleep in her bed, Marcus and Sarah sat together on the couch in the living room. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of Emma's breathing from down the hall and the occasional settling of old wood. She's right, you know, Sarah said, curled up beside Marcus with her head on his shoulder. About all of it. You are already part of our family. Sarah, Marcus began, but she interrupted him. Whatever you're worried about, whatever you think is so complicated about your life, we can figure it out, she said. I've been thinking about this for weeks and I can't come up with any reason why we shouldn't be together except fear. What if the fear is justified? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah lifted her head to look at him. Is it? Do you have some terrible secret that would hurt me or Emma? Marcus met her gaze, seeing the trust and love there. I would never hurt either of you, he said with complete honesty. But my life is unusual. There are things about me that you might not be able to accept. Try me, Sarah said simply. Marcus looked at this woman who had shown him nothing but kindness, who had welcomed him into her home and her heart, who trusted him with her most precious treasure. She deserved the truth, even if it meant losing her. I'm not entirely human, he said quietly. Sarah waited, apparently expecting him to continue. I'm what people would call a vampire, Marcus said, the words feeling strange after centuries of secrecy. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Are you serious? She asked finally. Completely? Like fangs and blood and all of that? Marcus nodded. Though I haven't fed from a human in over 50 years, I survive on donated blood from blood banks now. Sarah sat up straighter, processing this information. That's why you're always so pale, why you never eat much when you're here, why your skin is always cold. Yes. And you've been... How old are you, Marcus? 238, Marcus said quietly. Sarah stared at him, clearly trying to wrap her mind around this information. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that you're a centuries-old vampire, and you're worried that this would be a problem for me." Marcus nodded, confused by her calm reaction. "Marcus," Sarah said, beginning to smile, "I'm a single mother who works in pediatric oncology. I spend every day watching children fight battles that would break most adults, and I watch families hold together through the impossible. After everything I've seen, do you really think finding out that the man I love is a vampire is going to scare me away?" Marcus stared at her in amazement. "You're not afraid?" "Of you? Never," Sarah said firmly. "You've been nothing but gentle and kind since the day we met. You've cared for Emma like she was your own daughter. You've been patient with my fears and protective of both of us. Why would I be afraid of you now?" "Because I'm a monster," Marcus said quietly. "No," Sarah said, taking his face in her hands. "You're the man who makes pancakes for my daughter, who stays up with her when she's sick, who listens to me after hard days at work. You're the man who has made our little family feel complete for the first time since David died." "That's not a monster, Marcus. That's the person I want to spend my life with." Marcus felt something breaking open in his chest, some wall he had built around his heart centuries ago finally crumbling. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Sarah said and leaned forward to kiss him. The kiss was everything Marcus had imagined, and more. Sarah's lips were warm and soft against his, and she tasted like hope and home and everything he had thought lost to him forever. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "What about Emma?" Marcus asked. "Will we tell her?" Sarah considered this. "Not yet. She's 7, and vampire is a pretty complicated concept. But she loves you, and that's what matters right now. We'll figure out the rest as we go." 3 weeks later, Marcus Chen officially moved into the little house with the blue door. Emma helped him unpack his clothes into the closet he would share with her mother, chattering excitedly about how they would redecorate his study to make room for all his old books. That night, as they tucked Emma into bed together, she looked up at both of them with the satisfaction of someone whose carefully laid plans had finally come to fruition. "I knew this would happen," she announced. "From the very first night when you came to dinner, I knew you belonged with us." "How did you know that?" Sarah asked, smoothing Emma's hair back from her forehead. "Because when Marcus looked at us, he had the same look in his eyes that I have when I see something I really, really want," Emma explained. "And when you looked at him, you had the same look you get when you watch me sleeping and think I don't know you're there, like you love someone so much it makes you happy and scared at the same time." Marcus and Sarah exchanged amazed looks over Emma's head. "You're a very smart little girl," Marcus said softly. "I know," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "And now we're really a family, so you have to teach me that song in Romanian and help me build that treehouse we talked about and come to all my school things forever and ever." "Forever and ever," Marcus agreed. And for the first time in 2 centuries, the word forever didn't feel like a curse. As they turned off the lights and left Emma's room, Sarah slipped her hand into Marcus's. "No regrets?" she asked quietly. Marcus thought about his old life, the centuries of loneliness and isolation, the emptiness that had defined his existence for so long. Then he thought about pancake breakfasts and bedtime stories, about Emma's laughter and Sarah's smile, about belonging somewhere and being needed and loved. "None," he said, and meant it completely. Outside, the moon was full and bright, shining down on the little house with the blue door where a very unusual family had just become complete. Inside, a former vampire king had finally found what he had been searching for across centuries of darkness: a home, a family, and a love that would last forever. 6 months later, Marcus stood in Sarah's garden, watching Emma chase butterflies while Sarah tended to her flowers. The evening sun was setting behind the trees, painting everything in golden light, and Marcus felt a contentment that he had never experienced in his long existence. "Marcus!" Emma called, running toward him with a butterfly net. "Come help me catch the pretty orange one." As Marcus joined Emma in her butterfly hunt, Sarah watched from her garden with a smile that held nothing but pure happiness. Her strange family was exactly perfect as it was: a pediatric nurse, a second grader, and a centuries-old vampire who had learned that sometimes the most unlikely combinations make the strongest bonds. "Don't be upset, sir. My mom is yours to borrow," Emma had said that first night in the park, in her innocent way offering to share the most precious thing in her world. But what she had really done was offer Marcus something far more valuable: the chance to stop borrowing happiness and start truly living it. And as the three of them spent the evening together in their garden, chasing butterflies and planning their next family adventure, Marcus knew that Emma had been right all along. Everyone did need family, and sometimes